Okay, so today we're going to talk about Chapter 30, Section 2, called Totalitarianism, and we're going to examine Stalinist Russia as a case study. So from when Russia went from the horrible rule of the czars to the Bolshevik Revolution under Vladimir Lenin and, the resulting civil war that led to the deaths of 14 million people, what happened next? And so we'll start with totalitarianism. Now, factory work tends to pay more than what people could make on farms. And since people were generally, as the Soviet Union was in the process of industrializing, were making a little more money, this actually did spur demand for more expensive goods. Which, the downside of this is the Soviet Union was so far behind in regards to industrialization, there was actually a very limited production of consumer-based goods. Part of this could be explained by the fact that the Soviet Union was an absolutely totalitarian state, meaning that when Joseph Stalin assumed control, the government dominated every aspect of people's lives. And there are many countries with totalitarian regimes. North Korea is probably the most famous modern example, but we're going to examine Soviet Russia during the reign of Joseph Stalin to look at what this means, where a government controls every single aspect of a person's life. First off, you better not joke around about a government if you live in a totalitarian state. The slightest comment or question could get you killed. Because a secret police means that any of you could be a part of it. And so any offhanded comment about the government, whether it was a joke or serious, could get you killed. That the government would use a police to spy on and even intimidate people. What we also see in totalitarian societies are purges. Yes, that's a real thing. So I guess the purge should say, based on a true story. The Great Purge in communist Russia was a time when Joseph Stalin was indirectly responsible for the deaths of 8 to 12 million of his own people. Anybody suspected of disloyalty for any reason would disappear. Also, the public school system was used not to teach critical thinking and literacy skills. It was used to shape people's minds through indoctrination. All of a young person's years in school were to serve the purpose of the state, to extol the virtues of the state, and to teach young people that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And it wasn't just your time at school that you were taught this. The state would even create youth groups, organizations where young people could attend and do fun things and at the same time learn about how amazing their state is. Yay! Go Boy Scouts of America. The Hitler Youth were created for that exact purpose. You see, the Hitler Youth were the German version of the Boy Scouts. They would go to meetings, they had their own pledge, they had their own code, they had their own handbook, they would go on camping trips together. The idea was to train future leaders while at the same time serving the needs of the state. What else do we see in a totalitarian state? Well, we're going to find propaganda. You see, any form of mass communication in a totalitarian state is controlled by the state. It's kind of scary, right? Here, you can Google anything and everything. Some of it is blocked at the school. China has a nationwide internet filter so that you cannot search certain things. North Korea does not allow public access to the internet. Period. They don't have the internet there. Why? Because the state controls the flow of information. And so if you turn on the television in North Korea, all you will see is North Korean television. And the only information you will have access to, whether it's books, printed magazines, or television or electronic media, is information that supports the views of the state. What about religion? In a totalitarian state, religion might be, not always, but might be branded as an enemy of the state. Ethnic minorities might be branded as enemies of the state. Religious persecution is common. Persecution of minorities is common. Because nothing makes us feel better about repression than getting to repress someone else. Somehow it makes us feel better when our freedom is taken away if we get to hurt other people. Go figure. And so a police state is a place where the police are everywhere. Sometimes they're in plain clothes, sometimes they're uniforms. And the police attack not only criminals, but political opponents. Sometimes in great shows of force, and sometimes in secret. This great purge was a campaign of terror that Stalin waged against his own people to the point where they were afraid to do anything. By the end of 1938, Stalin had absolute control over every action of every person in the Soviet Union. And 8 to 12 million people had died to make that happen. The government controlled all newspapers, all radio, all movies. Artists could be killed for painting any image that would be seen as disloyal. Newspapers could be completely destroyed for printing anything that would be seen as disloyal. All printed media had to extol the virtues of the government. The government controlled all aspects of education. Not just the teacher selection process, but the curriculum, the administration, the oversight of teachers. From the earliest years to the latest years, all aspects of a young person's education was controlled by the state. Teachers were frequently victims of the purge because those with education are more commonly apt to challenge authority, and then they would disappear. The Soviet Union even attacked the Russian Orthodox Church and had members of the Orthodox Church or Jewish synagogues killed. The Soviet Union wanted to be the end of everything. Stalin once said that religion was the opiate of the masses. It did not serve the needs of the state, therefore it needed to be destroyed. And so under Joseph Stalin, your thoughts and beliefs were also controlled. In regards to the economy, the idea of communism is to put the means of production into the hands of the people. And so Stalin came up commonly with these 5-year plans, these plans for developing the economy. We're going to do XXX to make these things happen. And with that level of control, perhaps the greatest level of control in the history of Russia, guess what? He got the factories running. He got the farms producing. But he had absolute control over the economy. And so he wasn't concerned with making consumer goods. He was concerned with making a strong military, a prospering economy. And he did it by killing anyone who got in his way. Another part of his 5-year plan was to ultimately create a command economy. That is, where the government controlled all economic decisions. By 1928, the government had created large collective farms. These are state-controlled agricultural production facilities. That is, any and all farms in Russia would be under the control of the Soviet Union. Anyone who opposed this, guess what, got killed. And of course the Russian peasants opposed this. Why? Because they're all farmers. That means that the army showed up at their farm and said, this is no longer your farm, it's the people's farm. 5 to 10 million farmers died because they would not leave their farms when told to by the army. By 1938, the government controlled all the farms anyway and killed anyone who opposed them and got the farms producing. Because again, they would kill anyone who opposed them. Now, these gains come at a great cost. There were very limited personal freedoms. One odd thing about communism teaches the equality of all. Gender equality, racial equality, etc. That women are equal to men. So like men, women were also forced to join the labor force. The state would provide funded child care, free child care provided by the state so that women could join the labor force. Now, by the mid-1930s, Stalin had transformed the Soviet Union into an absolute totalitarian regime. He controlled all aspects of Soviet life. He was absolutely unopposed as dictator and Communist Party leader. He was absolutely feared by his people and demanded absolute conformity and obedience.